"You're nothing but a janitor," my daughter's fiancé sneered. Champagne flute raised like a weapon against my calloused hands. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. To the evening when everything I carefully built in shadows was about to crumble into the most satisfying kind of light. If you feel like this story might reach you somehow, follow the channel. That way, you help me bring more stories like this, and we grow with every life we learn from. The mansion's doorbell echoed through chambers that could house half my neighborhood. I stood on the marble threshold, my worn work boots suddenly feeling heavier than the small velvet box tucked deep in my jacket pocket. 27 years of emptying trash cans and mopping floors had taught me to make myself invisible, but tonight invisibility felt more like shame. "Dad!" Emma's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. She appeared in the doorway, radiant in cream silk, every inch the successful architect I'd raised her to become. Her smile faltered slightly as she took in my appearance. Pressed khakis, clean work shirt, the closest thing to formal wear in my closet. "You made it." The words carried relief and something else. Apology, perhaps. Behind her, like a shadow in an expensive suit, appeared him. Nathaniel Blackwood III. The name alone commanded respect in the city's legal circles. The man himself commanded something else entirely, a cold calculation that made my skin crawl. Robert. His handshake lasted exactly 2 seconds. Measured, dismissive. "Still working maintenance at the university?" "Custodial services," I corrected quietly. 27 years next month. Nathaniel's laugh was crystal sharp. Admirable dedication to simplicity. Emma's hand found my arm, a gentle warning. I felt the tension in her fingers, the way she positioned herself slightly between us. My daughter, brilliant, protective, caught between two worlds she never should have had to navigate. "Come in, Dad. Dinner's almost ready." The interior made my cramped apartment look like a broom closet. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow fragments across walls lined with books that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Everything whispered wealth, from the Persian rugs beneath my feet to the oil paintings that watched from gilded frames. "Impressive home," I said, because silence felt more dangerous. "Thank you." Nathaniel straightened his already perfect tie. The down payment alone was more than most people see in a lifetime, but investment property in this market, ... God. He shrugged, as if dropping $500,000 was equivalent to buying groceries. Emma guided us toward a dining room that belonged in a magazine. The table could seat 12, though only 3 places were set. China so thin it seemed translucent. Wine glasses that caught the light like captured stars. "I brought something for Emma," I said, retrieving the velvet box from my pocket. "Thought she might like it for the wedding." The box felt insignificant in this cathedral of excess. Emma's eyes brightened, but Nathaniel's expression shifted to something approaching interest, the way a hawk might regard a field mouse. "Dad, you didn't have to open it," I said gently. Her fingers worked the small clasp with reverence. She'd learned from childhood the careful way we'd always treated the few precious things we owned. The box opened to reveal my mother's sapphire necklace, the stones deep blue as midnight, surrounded by what I knew to be genuine diamonds, though their setting was understated, elegant rather than ostentatious. Emma's gasp was worth every sacrifice I'd made to keep that necklace out of pawn shops during her leaner college years. "Dad, it's beautiful, but this must be worth..." "Costume jewelry," Nathaniel interrupted, barely glancing at the piece. "Pretty, but hardly appropriate for our wedding. Emma will be wearing the Blackwood family diamonds. They've been featured in Town and Country twice." The dismissal hit harder than intended, not because he was wrong, he couldn't know what he was looking at, but because of the casual cruelty in his voice. The way he reduced something precious to worthless with a single glance. Emma's face flushed. "Nathaniel, that's my father's gift." "Of course, darling. I'm sure it has sentimental value." He might as well have said, "garbage." I watched my daughter struggle between loyalty and social expectation, her fingers closing protectively around the necklace. This was the moment I'd feared, watching her choose between two worlds, knowing she shouldn't have to choose at all. "Dinner," she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. We moved to the table like actors in a play none of us wanted to perform. The meal began with small cruelties, the kind rich people specialize in, comments wrapped in silk, but sharp enough to draw blood. "Robert, you must be so proud of Emma's success," Nathaniel said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "Architecture at Stanford, internship at Morrison and Associates. Quite a leap from your background." "Very proud," I replied, watching Emma's knuckles whiten around her fork. "Though I imagine you worried about the tuition costs. Stanford isn't exactly affordable for someone in your position." The words hung in the air like smoke. Emma's scholarship had covered most expenses, but he didn't know that. Didn't need to know that. "We managed," I said. "I'm sure you did." His smile never reached his eyes. Sacrifice is noble in its way, though I've always believed children shouldn't have to suffer for their parents' limitations. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Nathaniel," Emma's voice carried a warning. "I'm simply making conversation, darling. Your father and I hardly move in the same circles. It's natural to be curious about different perspectives." Different. The word carried weight, pressed down on us like judgment from on high. I thought about the bank statements hidden in my bedroom wall, numbers that would make this conversation laughably absurd. About the anonymous donations that had rebuilt the university's science wing, funded scholarships for dozens of students like Emma once was. About the investment portfolio that generated more in monthly interest than Nathaniel's law firm billed in a quarter. But those thoughts stayed buried. They had to. "Tell me about your work," I said instead, deflecting his attention from Emma. "Corporate law, mergers, acquisitions, the occasional criminal defense for clients who can afford discretion." He warmed to his favorite subject, himself. "Last month, one handled the Brennan Industries acquisition. $60 million deal, the kind of numbers that reshape markets." He paused, waiting for the appropriate awe. When it didn't come, his expression hardened slightly. "Of course, you probably can't relate to that kind of scope. Different worlds," I agreed quietly. "Exactly." He leaned back, satisfied. "Though I do admire honest work. Someone has to clean the buildings, after all. Society needs its support staff. Like I was furniture that happened to be capable of speech." Emma's face had gone pale, her barely touched dinner growing cold. I wanted to reach across the table, to tell her this didn't matter, that his words couldn't diminish what we built together. But the distance between us felt oceanic. "Actually," Nathaniel continued, his voice taking on the cadence of a closing argument, "I've been meaning to discuss something with you, Robert." "About the wedding?" My stomach clenched. "What about it?" "Well, you understand this isn't just a celebration. It's a professional event in many ways. My partners will be there, along with clients, city council members, federal judges. The kind of people who shape this city's future." He paused to refill his wine glass, the silence stretching until it became unbearable. "I'm sure you can appreciate the delicate nature of such gatherings. Image matters in my line of work. Perception becomes reality." "Get to the point," I said, though I already knew where this was heading. "The point is simple." He met my eyes directly for the first time all evening. "Your presence would be problematic." The words hit like a physical blow. Around the table, silence fell heavy as a burial shroud. "Excuse me?" My voice came out smaller than intended. "You're a janitor, Robert. A very dedicated one, I'm sure, but still." He shrugged, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "My guests operate at a different level. CEOs, politicians, cultural influencers. Can you honestly say you'd be comfortable in that environment?" "That's my father," Emma said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "And I respect that," Nathaniel replied smoothly. "But this wedding is an investment in our future. I won't compromise my professional relationships for misplaced sentimentality." The room began to spin slightly. A ringing started in my ears, drowning out Emma's protests. I thought about standing up, walking away, preserving what little dignity remained. But something kept me rooted to my chair, a stubborn pride that refused to give him the satisfaction of my retreat. "I raised her," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. 27 years. Every scraped knee, every school play, and that was admirable. He cut me off. But this is reality. You mop floors for a living. My guests create empires. Do you really think you belong in that conversation? The question hung between us like a challenge. In the distance, I could hear Emma arguing with him, her voice rising with each word. But their conversation felt muffled, secondary to the roaring in my head. Nathaniel stood, his decision made. Perhaps we should continue this privately. The terrace overlooked the garden where workers were arranging white chairs in perfect rows, stringing lights between ancient oak trees like captured stars. My daughter's wedding happening right in front of me while I was being systematically erased from it. Nathaniel positioned himself against the marble railing, the garden serving as a backdrop to his unconscious arrogance. I stood near the door, clutching my mother's necklace box like a lifeline. Beautiful view, isn't it? He gestured toward the city lights beyond his property line. This house cost $3.7 million. The wedding itself will run close to $400,000. The numbers were meant to intimidate, to remind me of my place in the world's hierarchy. They had the opposite effect. $400,000, I repeated, tasting the words. The flowers alone are $30 grand. Photography, another 20. Emma's dress. He smiled with the satisfaction of a man discussing a successful investment. Let's just say it cost more than you make in 6 months. Each figure was a calculated insult, designed to remind me that I existed in a different economic universe. I watched the workers below, arranging chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and felt something cold and patient uncoiling in my chest. I paid for her education, I said quietly. With what? Tips from your janitorial work. His laugh was sharp as broken glass. Please. Emma told me about the scholarship money, the financial aid, the work-study programs. You contributed what you could, I'm sure, but let's not pretend you were the primary provider. The lie hit harder than his earlier insults because it contained just enough truth to sting. Yes, scholarships had helped. Yes, Emma had worked part-time jobs, but the majority of her expenses, tuition, housing, books, the laptop she needed, the professional wardrobe for internships, those had come from me. From accounts he knew nothing about. She's my daughter, I said. She's my fiancé. His voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel. And I won't let you turn her wedding into a charity case. This isn't about family sentiment, Robert. This is about protecting what matters. And I don't matter? Honestly? He turned to face me fully, his expression devoid of even polite pretense. No, you don't. You're a phase in Emma's life, a reminder of where she came from, but on her future. I can give her everything you never could. Security, status, a place in society that actually matters. The workers below had nearly finished with the chairs. Row after row of white seats, all facing an altar where my daughter would marry this man, where I wouldn't be allowed to sit. What if I refused to go quietly? I asked. His smile was predatory. Then you'll force Emma to choose between her father and her future. Is that really what you want? To make her wedding day about your hurt feelings? The manipulation was masterful. He'd positioned the choice perfectly. My pride versus Emma's happiness. Any protest would seem selfish, petty, small-minded. Besides, he continued, it's not like you can afford to fight this. Legal fees alone would bankrupt you. And my firm handles some very influential people who wouldn't appreciate their children's janitor causing ... complications. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Step out of line, and even my small world could disappear. I looked down at the necklace box in my hands, thinking about the woman who'd worn it before Emma, my mother, who'd cleaned houses to survive, who died never knowing her son had become one of the wealthiest men in the state. Fine, I said quietly. Nathaniel's victory smile was radiant. I knew you'd see reason. Emma will understand, in time. This is what's best for everyone. Through the glass door, I could see Emma pacing in the dining room, her face twisted with worry and anger. She caught my eye and pressed her palm against the glass, a silent question in her expression. I mouthed, "It's okay," and watched her shoulders slump in defeat. There is one thing, Nathaniel said, his voice casual but sharp. The gift, that ... necklace. What about it? Well, it's hardly appropriate for our social circle. Costume jewelry at a $400,000 wedding? He laughed softly. People would notice. They talk. It would reflect poorly on Emma. My grip tightened on the box. It was my mother's. I'm sure it has sentimental value, but sentiment doesn't photograph well in Vogue. They're covering our wedding, you know? The young power couple feature. Emma's jewelry needs to match the caliber of the event. You want me to take it back? I think it would be best. For everyone involved, the final insult. Not only was I being erased from the wedding, but even my gift, the last physical connection between my family and Emma's future, was deemed unworthy of his manufactured paradise. I'll think about it, I said. Think quickly, he replied. The wedding is next Saturday. After that, he shrugged. Well, after that, what you think won't matter much, will it? 3 days later, Emma called. Dad, we need to talk. Her voice carried the weight of sleepless nights and impossible choices. I'd been expecting this call, dreading it, preparing for it since leaving Nathaniel's house with my dignity in tatters and my mother's necklace still clutched in my stubborn hands. About the wedding, I said. About everything. A pause. Can you come over? To my apartment? Emma's place was a study in careful restraint. Nice enough to impress, modest enough not to threaten. She met me at the door in jeans and an old Stanford sweatshirt, looking more like the girl I'd raised than the polished woman she'd become. Coffee? She asked. Please. We moved through the familiar ritual of domestic comfort, postponing the inevitable conversation. But when we finally sat across from each other at her small kitchen table, the weight of unspoken words filled the space between us. He told me what you discussed, she said finally. Did he? Dad, I'm so sorry. I never wanted, her voice cracked. I never wanted you to feel unwelcome. Not at my wedding. Not anywhere. But she looked down at her hands, wrapped around her coffee mug like it might anchor her to something solid. But I love him, and I don't know how to choose between the two most important men in my life. The honesty was brutal and beautiful. My brave girl, finally admitting the impossible position she'd been placed in. You shouldn't have to choose, I said. But I do, don't I? Because he won't back down and you ... She looked up, searching my face. You're you. You'll sacrifice anything for my happiness, even your own. She knew me too well. Maybe there's another way, I said carefully. What do you mean? I thought about the files hidden in my apartment, the carefully maintained anonymity, the life I built in shadows while she grew up, believing we barely scraped by. About the decision I'd been avoiding for years, the secret that had become heavier with each passing day. What if Nathaniel knew more about me, about our situation? Emma frowned. Dad, what are you talking about? Before I could answer, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. What? I asked. It's from my assistant at work. There's something on the news about the university, about a major donor being revealed. She was already reaching for her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. The local news website loaded slowly, and then there it was, the headline that would change everything. Mystery. Philanthropist revealed. Janitor Robert Chun donated $50 million to State University below. The headline was a photo I'd hoped never to see. Security footage from last month's Donor Appreciation Gala, where I'd finally agreed to accept recognition for my contributions. The image showed me shaking hands with the university president, a ceremonial check in the background displaying numbers that made Nathaniel's wedding budget look like pocket change. Emma's coffee mug slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering against the kitchen floor in a spray of ceramic and dark liquid. Dad? Her voice was small, confused, completely lost. What ... What is this? I sat back in my chair. 27 years of careful deception unraveling in real time. It's complicated, I said. $50 million? She was reading from the screen now, her voice rising with each word. The university's largest single donor. Anonymous contributions over 2 decades, totaling more than $100 million. Funding for scholarships, research facilities, faculty positions. She looked up from the laptop, her face a mask of shock and something approaching betrayal. $100 million, Dad? We ate mac and cheese for dinner 3 nights a week because we couldn't afford groceries, and you've donated $100 million? Emma, no. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window overlooking the city. No, You don't get to Emma me right now. You let me work 16-hour days during college to pay for textbooks while you were sitting on a fortune? The pain in her voice cut deeper than any of Nathaniel's calculated cruelties. You let me feel guilty for choosing an expensive school. You let me worry about student loans, about whether I was being selfish for wanting an education you couldn't afford. She turned to face me, tears streaming down her cheeks. How could you do that to me? Because I wanted you to understand the value of work, I said quietly. To know that you earned your success, that it wasn't handed to you. By lying to me? By watching me struggle when you could have helped? By raising you to be strong enough that you didn't need my help? The words hung between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing, recalibrating everything she thought she knew about her life. Where did the money come from? She asked finally. Your grandfather, I said. The restaurant business was more successful than he let on. Much more successful. When he died, he left everything to me, with one condition, that I use it to help others, not to make my own life easier. So you became a janitor. I stayed a janitor. The work was honest, and it kept me grounded, reminded me where I came from. And the donations started small. A scholarship here, a facility upgrade there. But the money kept growing, faster than I could give it away. Investments, real estate, compound interest. I shrugged. Numbers on a page, mostly. She sank back into her chair, looking suddenly fragile. Does Nathaniel know? Not yet, but he will soon enough. As if summoned by our conversation, her phone rang. Nathaniel's name flashed on the screen. Emma looked at me, then at the phone, then back at me. Answer it, I said. She did. Nathaniel? Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. I couldn't hear his words, but I could imagine them. The shock, the recalculation, the sudden shift from dismissal to desperate interest. Yes, I saw the news, she said. Yes, he's here. A pause. No, Nathaniel, we're not coming over right now. We're talking. Another pause. Longer this time. Because for the first time in months, I'm learning who my father really is. And I'm not sure I like what I'm discovering about my fiancé. She hung up without waiting for his response. He wants to see you, she said. I imagine he does. He called you Mr. Chen instead of Robert. I couldn't help but smile at that. Amazing how quickly respect follows revelation, isn't it? Anna was quiet for a moment, then asked the question I'd been dreading. Are you going to go to the wedding now? Now that he knows? Do you want me there? That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. She stood up again, moved to the window, watched the city spread out below us like a vast circuit board of light and possibility. He's calling back, she said, glancing at her buzzing phone. Let him. He'll keep calling. Then turn it off. She did. In the sudden quiet, I could hear the subtle sounds of the building around us. Footsteps in the hallway. A television somewhere. The distant hum of traffic. Normal sounds. The sounds of people living ordinary lives, unaware that everything they thought they knew had just shifted beneath their feet. What happens now? Emma asked. Now you decide what kind of person you want to marry, I said, and what kind of life you want to live. And you? I thought about the necklace, still sitting in its velvet box on my kitchen counter, about the wedding that would happen with or without me, about the man who'd spend the next week frantically trying to repair the damage he'd done to his relationship with someone he'd just discovered was worth more than his entire social circle combined. Now I go home and wait for your answer. The call came at 6 a.m. the next morning. Mr. Smith? The voice was carefully controlled, professionally humble. This is Nathaniel Blackwood. I was wondering if we might have lunch today. There are some things I'd like to discuss. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. What things? I asked. Well, I think there may have been some misunderstandings between us. I'd like the opportunity to clear the air. Misunderstandings. The word was perfect in its inadequacy. Where? I said. The University Club? They have an excellent Denny's on 5th Street, I interrupted. Noon. A pause. The University Club was where men like him conducted business over wine that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Denny's was where janitors ate breakfast before their shifts. Of course, he said finally. I'll see you there. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a booth in the back. away from the windows. The lunch crowd was typical for a weekday. Construction workers, retirees, students from the community college across the street. My people, in other words. Nathaniel arrived exactly on time, looking profoundly out of place in his $1,000 suit among the vinyl booths and fluorescent lighting. He spotted me immediately and approached with the careful gait of a man walking across thin ice. "Mr. Smith," he said, extending his hand. I didn't take it. He slid into the booth across from me, his eyes taking in the laminated menu, the cracked plastic salt shakers, the coffee stain on the table that had been there since 1987. "Interesting choice of venue," he said. "I like it. It's honest." A waitress appeared, Maria, who'd been working this shift for 15 years and always remembered how I liked my coffee. "The usual, honey?" she asked. "Please, and coffee for my guest." "What's the usual?" Nathaniel asked after she left. "2 eggs over easy wheat toast, hash browns. It's why I order every Tuesday." "You eat here every Tuesday?" "For the past 8 years." He was quiet, processing this information, trying to reconcile the image of a man worth hundreds of millions eating a $7.99 breakfast special at a chain restaurant with a B+ health rating. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "Do you?" "I made assumptions about your circumstances, your situation. I was wrong." "What were you wrong about?" He shifted uncomfortably. "About your financial position." "Just my financial position?" Another pause. "About your worth to Emma. About your place in her life. And now? Now I understand things differently. Because of the money. Because of what the money represents. Your success. Your achievements." I leaned back against the vinyl booth, studying him. "Tell me what you think it represents." "Business acumen. Strategic thinking. The ability to generate wealth and influence outcomes." He was warming to his theme, falling back into the language of his professional world. $100 million doesn't happen by accident. It requires vision, discipline, the capacity to inherit money from your father and not waste it all on expensive toys and bad investments. He stopped mid-sentence. "That's what it represents, Nathaniel. Self-control. Nothing more, nothing less." Maria returned with our order, my usual, and a coffee for Nathaniel that he ignored completely. "I worked as a janitor," I continued, cutting into my eggs, "because I liked the work, because it was honest and simple and left me time to think about other things. The money was separate from that, just numbers and accounts I rarely looked at. But surely you could have done more with it. Invested in businesses, developed properties, created jobs. I created scholarships, funded research, built libraries. Larry's. What's more valuable? Another shopping mall or educating kids who couldn't otherwise afford college?" He had no answer for that. "The point is," I said, "the money didn't make me worthy of respect. It just made you capable of recognizing worth you'd ignored before. I see that now. Do you?" "Yes, and I want to make it right." I took a bite of hash browns, watching him squirm in the uncomfortable silence. "How?" I asked. "Well, clearly you should be at the wedding. More than that, you should walk Emma down the aisle. It would be an honor to have you there. Because I'm rich. Because you're her father. I was her father 3 days ago, too." He flinched. "You're right. I was short-sighted, focused on the wrong things." "What things?" "Image, perception, what people would think. And now?" "Now, I realize what people will think is that I'm incredibly fortunate to be marrying the daughter of one of the state's most generous philanthropists." There it was. The real reason for this lunch, this carefully crafted apology. Not genuine remorse, but social calculation recalibrated to account for new information. I finished my eggs and pushed the plate away. "Tell me about Emma," I said. "What about her? What do you love about her?" The question caught him off guard. She's brilliant, beautiful, accomplished. Those are qualities. I asked what you love about her. Well, she challenges me, makes me think differently about things. Like what? Like priorities. What matters in life? And what matters in life? He looked around the restaurant, searching for an answer that would satisfy me. "Success," he said finally. "Achievement. Building something meaningful." What has Emma built? Her career. Her reputation in the architectural community. What else? I'm not sure what you're asking. When she was 12, she spent an entire summer building a treehouse in our backyard. Not because she needed a place to play, but because the neighbor's cat had died and his little girl was heartbroken. Emma thought she needed a special place to remember him. Nathaniel nodded politely, not understanding why this mattered. She spent her own allowance money on materials, learned to use tools watching YouTube videos, cut her hands a dozen times on rough wood, and kept working anyway. When it was finished, she invited the neighbor girl over for a ceremony to celebrate the cat's life. That single quotes, sweet. That's Emma. She sees pain and tries to fix it, even when it costs her something. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes directly. What pain of yours has she tried to fix? The question hung between us like a test he didn't know how to pass. I'm not sure I have any pain that needs fixing. Everyone has pain, Nathaniel. The question is whether you're brave enough to let her see it. He was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Are you going to come to the wedding? He asked finally. Are you going to tell her? I said yes, before asking her what she wants. No, this is her decision. Good. Then here's my decision. I'll come to the wedding if Emma asks me to. Not because you suddenly discovered I'm rich, but because she wants her father there. And if she doesn't ask, then I'll know she's learned something important about choosing partners who value the right things. I stood up, leaving a 20 on the table. Mr. Smith. It's Robert, I said. Mr. Smith was my father. He was a good man who taught me that respect isn't something you earn with bank statements. It's something you give freely, or not at all. I walked toward the exit, then turned back. Oh, and Nathaniel? The necklace stays. Whether Emma wears it or not is up to her, but it's not leaving her possession, ever. His face went pale. Of course, I never meant to suggest. Yes, you did. You meant to suggest exactly what you said. The difference is, now you're afraid to say it out loud. I left him sitting in the booth, staring into his untouched coffee, probably wondering how a conversation he'd expected to control had slipped so completely through his fingers. Emma called that evening. Dad, can you come over? There's something I need to show you. When I arrived at her apartment, I found her sitting on the floor of her living room, surrounded by photo albums, her laptop open to what looked like architectural blueprints. What's all this? I asked. My life, she said simply. I've been going through everything, trying to understand ... Understand what? How I got here. How I became someone who could love a man who doesn't see my father as human. She gestured to the photos scattered around her. Birthday parties, graduations, the two of us at baseball games and school plays, and lazy Sunday mornings. Do you know what I remembered today? She asked. Tell me. Junior year of high school. I wanted to apply to a summer architecture program at Berkeley, but the application fee was $200. We didn't have it. I remembered. It was right after the restaurant's air conditioning had died, and I'd been debating whether to fix it or keep saving for a college fund. You told me to write an essay about why I deserved the scholarship money instead. Do you remember what you said? That anyone could pay a fee, but only someone with real passion could write a letter that mattered. I got the scholarship. Full ride for 6 weeks, plus housing. She smiled at the memory. I thought it was because of my essay. It was. No, Dad, it was because you called them. Because you explained our situation and asked them to give me a chance to prove I belonged there without money as a barrier. I was quiet. I found the thank you note you wrote them. It was in one of your old books. She held up a folded piece of paper. You thanked them for seeing potential instead of just bank accounts. She set the letter aside and picked up her laptop. I've been thinking about that, about seeing potential instead of bank accounts. And I designed something. She turned the screen toward me. The blueprints showed a building, sleek, modern, but somehow warm at the same time. What is it? I asked. A community center for the university district. Classes for adult learners, job training programs, childcare for working parents. She pointed to different sections of the design. Art studios here, computer lab there, meeting spaces for support groups. It's beautiful. I want to build it. With what money? She looked at me pointedly. I think you know. I studied the blueprints more carefully, seeing the thought and care that had gone into every detail. This wasn't a vanity project or a tax write-off. This was Emma's treehouse, scaled up for a community that needed it. How much? I asked. 6 million, maybe 8, depending on the site. And Nathaniel? Nathaniel thinks I should focus on more prestigious projects, buildings that photograph well for magazines. What do you think? I think I want to build something that matters. She closed the laptop and looked directly at me. I broke up with him. The words hit me like a physical relief, though I tried not to show it. When? This afternoon. After he spent 20 minutes explaining how we could leverage your philanthropic connections for his career advancement. I'm sorry. Are you? I'm sorry you're hurt. I'm not sorry he showed you who he was before you married him. She nodded, picking up one of the scattered photos. The two of us at her college graduation, both grinning at the camera. He asked me if I was going to give up a future with him for a past with you. What did you tell him? I told him he had it backwards. That you were my future, and he was just someone I'd outgrown. Pride swelled in my chest, mixed with relief and something approaching joy. What happens now? I asked. Now I design community centers instead of shopping malls. I wear a grandmother's necklace because it's beautiful and meaningful, not because it photographs well. And I learned to live with having a father who's apparently one of the most generous philanthropists in the state. You're angry about that. I'm processing it. But Dad? Yeah? I understand why you did it. All of it. The secrecy, the simple life, making me work for everything. She paused. I just wish you trusted me enough to let me choose. You were a child. I was 18 when I graduated high school, 22 when I finished college, 26 now. She counted off on her fingers. At what point was I going to be old enough for the truth? She had a point. I was afraid, I admitted. Of what? That you'd become someone different. Someone who saw money as a solution instead of a tool. Like Nathaniel. Like a lot of people. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you trust me now?" "With my life." "Then let's build that community center together. Your money, my design, our values. Partners? Partners?" She stood up and moved to her kitchen, returning with a bottle of champagne I recognized. The one I had given her when she graduated from Stanford, that she'd been saving for a special occasion. "What are we celebrating?" I asked. "The end of one life and the beginning of another." She popped a cork, and we toasted with coffee mugs because she didn't own proper champagne flutes. "To honest work," she said. "To meaningful buildings. To fathers who clean toilets and daughters who love them anyway. To secrets that finally see sunlight." We drank, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe again. Later, as I was preparing to leave, Emma asked one more question. "Dad, when the community center is built, what do we call it?" I thought about that for a moment. About my father, who taught me the value of work. About my mother, whose necklace would now pass to another generation. About the life I'd built in shadows, and the one I was finally ready to live in light. "We call it the treehouse," I said. Emma's smile was radiant. Perfect. The weeks that followed Emma's decision to end her engagement created ripples that spread far beyond our small family circle. News of the broken engagement traveled through the city's social networks with the speed of a wildfire, carrying with it whispers about the mysterious janitor philanthropist and his architect daughter who'd walked away from one of the city's most eligible bachelors. I continued my work at the university, though everything had changed. Word of my identity had spread among the staff, creating an awkward dynamic where people who'd worked alongside me for years suddenly didn't know how to interact with. Some treated me with newfound deference that made me uncomfortable. Others seemed suspicious, as if they'd discovered I'd been playing an elaborate joke on them. "Robert," Mrs. Henderson from the registrar's office said one morning as I emptied the trash bins in her department. She'd always been kind to me, often asking about Emma's progress through school and sharing stories about her own grandchildren. "Morning, Ellen," I replied, continuing my routine. I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure we weren't overheard. "My grandson, Timothy, he got one of those anonymous scholarships 3 years ago. The ones for first-generation college students." I paused in my work, meeting her eyes. "He's graduating this spring," she continued. "Pre-med. Because of that scholarship, he didn't have to work full-time to pay for school. He could focus on his studies." Tears gathered in her eyes. "That was you, wasn't it?" I didn't answer directly, but my small nod was enough. How many kids? She asked. How many families did you help without any of us knowing? It wasn't about knowing, I said gently. It was about helping. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Emma stood at my door with a manila folder thick with documents and an expression of determined curiosity. We need to talk about the foundation, she said, settling herself at my small kitchen table and spreading papers across its surface. What foundation? The one we're going to establish properly, with legal structure, transparent governance, and strategic giving guidelines. She looked up from the documents with the same focused intensity I'd seen when she tackled complex architectural projects. Dad, you've been operating like a one-man charity for decades. It's time to do this right. I poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from her, studying the papers she'd prepared. Financial projections, organizational charts, mission statements written in Emma's precise handwriting. You've been busy, I observed. I've been thinking about what you said when Nathaniel asked what the money represented. She pulled out a particular document and pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. You said it represented self-control, but I think it represents something more. What's that? Opportunity. Not just for you, but for everyone whose lives you've touched. She leaned back in her chair, the late afternoon light catching the sapphire in our grandmother's necklace. Do you know there's a waiting list for the scholarships you've funded? Over 300 applicants last year alone. The number surprised me. I'd left most of the administrative details to the university's financial aid office, preferring to remain removed from the individual stories. 300, I repeated. Kids like Timothy Henderson, like I was. Smart, driven, but without the resources to pursue their dreams. Emma's voice took on the passionate edge I remembered from her high school debates. We could help all of them, Dad, not just a lucky few. I studied the documents more carefully, seeing the thought and planning that had gone into her proposal. This wasn't a sentimental gesture or a daughter trying to assuage guilt about her father's hidden wealth. This was a serious business plan from someone who understood the difference between charity and impact. The Treehouse Foundation, I read from the mission statement, providing educational opportunities and community resources for underserved populations. Too sentimental? She asked, a hint of uncertainty creeping into her voice. Perfect, I said, and meant it. We spent the next 3 hours going through every detail of her proposal. Legal structure, funding mechanisms, oversight procedures. Emma had thought of everything, down to quarterly impact assessments and annual community meetings. There's one more thing, she said as we reached the end of the documents. I want to resign from Morrison & Associates. The announcement caught me off guard. Morrison & Associates was one of the city's most prestigious architectural firms, the kind of place that launched careers and opened doors to major projects. Why? Because I want to work for the foundation full-time. Design community centers, affordable housing, educational facilities. She met my eyes directly. I want to build things that matter, not just things that photograph well. Pride swelled in my chest, mixed with concern for her professional future. Emma, you've worked so hard to establish yourself at Morrison. Are you sure you want to walk away from that? I'm sure I want to walk towards something better. Her certainty reminded me of myself at her age, when I'd chosen to continue working as a janitor, despite having the means to pursue any career I wanted. Sometimes, the most important decisions are the ones that look foolish to outside observers. What did Morrison say when you gave notice? Emma's smile was wry. They offered me a partnership track and a 50% salary increase to stay. And I told them I'd already found something more valuable than money, which is purpose. That evening, after Emma left with promises to have the legal paperwork ready within a week, I sat in my apartment looking at the documents she'd left behind. Spreadsheets showing projected giving amounts, timelines for community center construction, scholarship criteria that would help hundreds of students. My phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Smith? The voice was professional but warm. This is Patricia Williams from Channel 7 News. I was hoping to schedule an interview about your philanthropic work. Word was spreading faster than I'd expected. In the 3 weeks since the university had announced my donations, I'd received calls from reporters, nonprofit organizations, and investment advisors who suddenly wanted to help me optimize my giving strategy. "I'm not interested in publicity," I said politely. "I understand your desire for privacy, but people are curious about your story. A janitor who's given away millions while living modestly. It's inspiring. It's just what anyone would do." "I don't think that's true, Mr. Smith. Most people, when they suddenly have wealth, change their entire lives. You kept emptying trash cans. The work was honest." That's exactly what people want to hear about. In a world where wealth often seems to corrupt, you've shown that money can be a tool for good without changing who you are. I thought about Mrs. Henderson's tears, about Timothy and the other students whose lives had been changed by scholarships they'd never know came from the man who cleaned their dormitories. "One interview," I said finally, "but not about me, about the kids. About what education can do when financial barriers are removed." "That's perfect, Mr. Smith. That's exactly the story we want to tell." After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, thinking about the strange turns life takes. A week ago, I'd been anonymous, invisible, content in my small world of honest work and secret generosity. Now I was becoming something I'd never wanted to be. A public figure, an inspiration, a symbol of something larger than myself. But maybe that was the price of keeping secrets for too long. Maybe some truths are too important to hide forever, even when revealing them changes everything you've carefully built. I looked at Emma's foundation documents again, at the mission statement written in her precise handwriting, at the projected impact numbers that represented real lives, real futures, real hope. Perhaps being visible was worth it if it meant being truly useful. 1 year later, the Treehouse Community Center opened on a Thursday in October, with a small ceremony attended by university officials, city council members, and about 200 people from the neighborhood who would actually use the building. Emma wore our grandmother's necklace. I wore my work uniform, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because it represented something true about who I was and who I intended to remain. The local news covered the opening, of course. They interviewed Emma about the architectural innovations, the sustainable design, the community partnerships that had made the project possible. Her confidence in front of the cameras impressed me. She spoke with the authority of someone who knew exactly why her work mattered. They interviewed me about the funding, about my decision to step out of philanthropic anonymity, about what it meant to be publicly recognized for charitable work I'd been doing quietly for decades. The questions were respectful but persistent, and I found myself talking about things I'd never expected to discuss publicly. "Why continue working as a janitor when you had the means to do anything?" the reporter asked. "Because the work taught me something important," I replied, "that every job, no matter how humble it seems, connects to something larger. When you clean a classroom, you're part of education. When you maintain a building, you're creating space for important things to happen. And now I've learned that being invisible has its value, but so does being seen. Sometimes you have to step into the light to cast the shadows others need." But the interview I was most proud of was the one they did with Maria, the waitress from Denny's, who was enrolled in the center's GED program. She stood in front of the camera wearing her graduation cap, having just completed her high school equivalency. "Mr. Smith's not just generous with his money," she told the reporter. "He's generous with his time, his attention, his respect. That matters more than the dollars. When someone sees you as valuable, it changes how you see yourself." Behind her, other students were arriving for evening classes. A construction worker learning computer skills, a young mother pursuing her nursing prerequisites, retirees taking art classes. The building hummed with the quiet energy of people working toward better futures. Later that evening, Emma and I stood on the center's roof garden, looking out over the city lights and the university campus where I'd spent 27 years emptying trash cans and learning that work has dignity regardless of how the world values. "Any regrets?" she asked, her voice carrying the contentment of someone who'd found her true calling. "About what?" "The quiet life, the anonymity. You can't go back to being invisible now." I thought about that question, weighing the losses against the gains. About the simple pleasure of work that nobody noticed. About the freedom that came with being underestimated. About the peace of helping others without recognition. No regrets, I said slowly. But I might miss the invisibility sometimes. Why? Because when people don't see you, they show you who they really are. When they do see you, they show you who they think you want them to be. Emma nodded, understanding the complexity of that truth. Nathaniel's been calling, by the way. Oh? Congratulating me on the community center, asking if I'd be interested in collaborating on some socially conscious development projects. Her tone carried a hint of amusement at his transparent attempt to reconnect. And I told him I was booked for the next decade. She paused, then added more seriously, he sent flowers for the opening ceremony, with a note apologizing for his narrow perspective and hoping we might find common ground in the future. How did that make you feel? Sad, mostly. Not for myself, but for him. He's intelligent enough to recognize value when it's pointed out to him, but not secure enough to see it on his own. She adjusted the necklace at her throat, the sapphires catching the city lights. I realized something about him, Dad. He doesn't actually love people. He collects them, like the art in his house or the cars in his garage. Status symbols that reflect well on his image. And you want someone who loves you, not what you represent. I want someone who would have respected you, even if you really were just a janitor. Someone who sees worth in work, not just wealth in accomplishments. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe around us. In the distance, I could see the university's clock tower, illuminated against the night sky. Tomorrow, I would return to different work, managing the foundation, reviewing grant applications, meeting with community organizations, but work nonetheless. You know what's funny? Emma said suddenly. What? All these years, I thought you were teaching me about struggling with limited resources. But you were actually teaching me about abundance, how to recognize it, how to use it responsibly, how to share it without losing yourself. I was teaching you what my father taught me, that wealth isn't what you have, it's what you do with what you've been given. Even when what you've been given is just strong hands and a willingness to work, especially then. Emma turned to face me fully, her expression serious in the way it got when she was processing something important. I have a confession, she said. What's that? I'm proud of you. Not because of the money, not because of the foundation, not even because of all the students you've helped. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I'm proud of you because you spent 27 years. Proving that character isn't about what others think of you. It's about what you do when no one's watching. The words hit deeper than any recognition I'd received from the university, any gratitude from scholarship recipients, any media coverage of our work. You know what I'm proud of? I asked. What? I'm proud that when you had to choose between comfort and conscience, you chose conscience. That when you had to choose between status and authenticity, you chose authenticity. That's not something I taught you. That's who you are. She reached over and squeezed my hand, a gesture that transported me back to countless moments throughout her childhood when simple touch had said more than words ever could. So what happens next? She asked. Next, we build more tree houses. Different kinds, for different people, but all based on the same principle, that everyone deserves a safe place to grow. And you? I keep learning what it means to be useful in the world. Turns out that's a bigger question than I thought. In the distance, the university clock chimed midnight, marking the end of one day and the beginning of another. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help. New ways to discover that the most important wealth isn't stored in bank accounts, but shared between people who see each other clearly. Some things don't change, no matter how much money you have or how many people finally learn your name. Some things, like the value of honest labor, like the importance of respect freely given, like the love between a father and daughter who've learned to see past surfaces to the truth underneath. Those things remain constant. Those things I'd learned are the only wealth that truly compounds over time. Dad, Emma said as we prepared to head back downstairs. Yeah, thank you for showing me that the best way to honor what you've been given is to use it in service of something larger than yourself. I put my arm around my daughter, thinking about all the small moments that had led to this large one, about the difference between having money and having purpose, about the strange and wonderful ways that secrets, when finally revealed, can become the foundation for something beautiful. You're welcome, I said. But the real thanks goes to everyone who's taught us what it means to build something that lasts. And as we walked through the community center we'd built together, past classrooms where dreams were taking shape, through hallways that echoed with the quiet sounds of people working toward better futures, under lights that would stay on late into the night because learning never really stops, I realized that the most valuable inheritance I could leave wasn't money. It was the knowledge that true wealth lies not in what you accumulate, but in what you contribute. Not in what you hoard, but in what you share. Not in what you build for yourself, but in what you build for others. That was the lesson my father had tried to teach me through his restaurant and his savings. That was the lesson I'd tried to teach Emma through work and sacrifice. And that was the lesson we were now teaching together. One scholarship, one building, one life at a time. Some fortunes are measured in dollars. Others are measured in the distance between where someone starts and where they're able to go because someone else believed in them. The second kind, I discovered, pays dividends forever. Thank you for staying with me and listening this far. Your attention is a gift. Did these minutes mean something to you? Then please, follow the channel. Every click from you is a push that helps me keep bringing stories that truly stay with us.